Okay, well, why don't we get into some of the the different factors that can affect the immune system? For example, diet and lifestyle.
Well, we know that the intestinal microbiome is like a signaling hub for um, the immune system. It integrates environmental inputs such as diet, genes, um, and these all affect metabolism, immunity, and our response to infection. So studies have conclusively documented that diets that are high in fiber and in fermented foods um, encourage diversity in the human intestinal microbiome that's associated with a more favorable immune response.
I think another role that the microbiome has is in metabolizing foodstuffs into nutrients like vitamins and minerals. We're really dependent on our microbiome for that. And in turn, our immune system is very dependent on having adequate amounts of all these micronutrients, and various immune cells require different amounts of certain vitamins, different amounts of certain minerals, but we know that they're all needed. Macronutrients too are really important. Protein, especially when we are fighting an infection, we tear through our protein stores and we often end up as protein deficient post-infection and need to replete. So I think that, diet really is important on both the macronutrient and a micronutrient level.
So, Paul, I can see you're itching to get in here. So what role does supplementation play in that then?
Yeah, I think the point about diet and intake really has to be the basis upon which we build all these things. But as Lise mentioned, during illness, we also tend to get deficient in most of the dependent nutrients for the immune system. And so in many, many cases, what is going in through diet is not enough to keep up with the demand that goes on. The other thing is, if you have somebody who's, very ill, they're often not taking in their regular component of nutrients from their diet. So supplementation is a way to build on what would be a good microbiome, a good diet, a good, again, an orchestration of all of the micronutrients getting into the system, so that we can build up the necessary precursor nutrients for immune function.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear you talk about, fermented foods as being a way of supporting and promoting that. Can you give me some examples of perhaps your favorite fermented foods? I know I'm a big fan of miso soup myself.
Well, I think that one of the most popular fermented foods that is consumed is the beverage kombucha, which is really interesting because although it probably has beneficial effects, as far as I know, there's not one human study that has documented any benefits of kombucha. And it's interesting that something would be so popular and such a money generator for people, the companies that make it, without really any good studies behind it.
And loaded with sugar as well, a lot of them.
Yeah. But besides that, I think that here in Hawaii, fermented foods are very popular because we have such a diverse culture. So we have kimchi, we have sauerkraut, and lots of different types of yogurts. And so it's a major component of the food that is available here in this diverse state. Another couple factors that I think should be mentioned here in terms of diet are sugar and alcohol, which are known to have immunosuppressive effects. And other factors are so strongly associated with decreased risk for cancer, such as medicinal mushrooms.
Right. Well, I do believe we're going to be having a program with you, Michael, in the near future that's going to do a deep dive into medicinal mushrooms. So I look forward to learning more about that. But in the meantime, so let's talk about some of the other things maybe that can affect the immune system. I mean, one thing that a lot of people are experiencing right now is heightened stress. Not only the stress of the pandemic, but also the economic stress. Many people are losing their jobs. They're crammed together with their families. There seems to be no escape. Maybe we can talk a little bit about stress.
Well, what you've mentioned are obviously is obviously an example of kind of a chronic long-term stressor that we are now all living with. However, stress in itself is not necessarily bad. There's benefits to, limited short-term stress in terms of its effect on our survival and as an adaptation to the fight or flight response.
Right.
And it's kind of nature's fundamental but underappreciated survival mechanism that can be harnessed actually to enhance immunoprotection. And like short-term fasting for minutes to hours can activate the immune system and enhance our innate or primary immunity as well as our adaptive or secondary immune responses.
So are you saying, Michael, that intermittent fasting is going to improve your immune response? Or are you saying that when you eat, you get an improved immune response? Or perhaps it's both?
Well, I think it can be both. It depends on what you're eating, though.
Right.
But
Fair
we do
enough.
know that after, a good 13 to 16-hour overnight fast, with the first consumption of calories, there's a resurgence of leukocyte activity. So I think it's the combination of the fast and the feeding that creates the immune activation. And I agree with Michael. I think stress serves an important role, but I think the challenge is that most of us are under so much stress so constantly that we don't reach our baseline. If we balance the stress with mindfulness-based practices, breathing practices, time in nature, time with loved ones, etc., we would retain that homeostatic stress response. But instead, we just kind of ratchet our stress response up. Cortisol levels rise, we become peripherally cortisol resistant, we lose the anti-inflammatory effects of cortisol, and with that, we start to put our body into an oxidatively stressed situation, which is very detrimental to immune function. So I do think chronic stress is a very key player in our kind of deficient immune response.
Well, I can tell you, hearing you, ratchet over those factors is making me feel a little stressed out right now.
Just
But
breathe.
breathe, yeah, exactly. But it is true, isn't it? Especially those of us who live in cities, the constant noise, the traffic, the pollution, we forget that these are all stresses on our systems.
Yeah, I'd just like to tag on to both of those. And it's easy to forget, especially, as Lise was saying, we're just, awash in stress and you can forget how much you're under. When Michael brings up the very necessary part of, the acute stress response, how healthy that is. And then, Lisa's talking about the chronic stress response. The stress system, which is, hormonal and neurotransmitter based, is very intimately involved in the orchestration Lisa was talking about of the immune modulation and function. And so acutely, it's actually sometimes involved in getting an acute immune response and modulating it. But if you have chronic stress, the fact that the chronic stress, neurochemistry and hormonal system is off balance throws the immune regulation, sometimes very, very off kilter. So I think, especially after a year, at this point that we're recording this, of people being, altered in their lifestyle and day-to-day activities, et cetera, it is very easy to forget how much chronic and constant stress we're under, and also to tie that to how deregulating to your immune function that is. So this is a real key issue.
I hope you enjoyed that highlight from a recent program on Nutramedica. If you want to get access to our full-length shows and live interactive events, you'll need to register as a healthcare professional at Nutramedica.org. To stay up to date with our latest programs, go ahead and subscribe to this YouTube channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell. We'll see you soon at Nutramedica.org.